Thank you very much, guys, for coming here. Let's see. I would like to start with a quote. So I think this quote actually synthesizes the idea, the fight we are doing. Basically, it's like a cat and game fight where we actually try to catch the bad guys and then we find new solutions for the catch again. And why does it have to be like this? We can actually try to hunt for them as well. Like the bad guys are hunting for new vulnerabilities in the system. Why not us hunting for them? So, with this being said, I'm going to finish my presentation. We can all go in. So, I joined. A little bit about myself. So I graduated from Imperial College in 2014, and since then I've been joining. I joined Kaspersky Lab, one of their amazing teams. Most of the time I'm procrastinating, but when I'm not doing that, I'm actually interested in the economy of DDoS attacks. Why are attackers motivated by launching DDoS attacks? Why is this entire IoT fiasco, Mirai fiasco, and everything happening? Also, part of my job is to build threat intelligence tools for my team in order to help them better hunt for new APTs and also handle big data. So, a little bit about my team. It was founded in 2008. It's called Global Research and Analysis Team, and we are mostly focusing on critical infrastructure threats. We are mostly focusing on advanced persistent threats that are targeting banks, nuclear power plants, governments, and we are actually taking on advanced malware created by governments or not. So we are interested in top of the line 0.1% of all the threats that exist on the internet. But today we're not going to talk about this kind of threats. Today we're going to talk about something else. Part of our research, and you might have heard about it, some of the APTs that my team discovered are like Stuxnet, are Duke, Flame, Red October. Who heard about Red October? Perfect, thank you. So we also discovered more stuff, and every year, as years go by, we discover more and more APT campaigns. So the most notable campaign, some of them I would like to mention are Regin, Duke2, and of course Lazarus and the Carbonaut guys, which were in the news last year. They stole a lot of money, so we went after them. A really nice research that was done by a really good friend of mine is Satellite Tura, which you can see him presenting later today. So I really recommend going to this presentation. It's amazing stuff. So we're doing top of the line stuff. We are actually focusing on the most advanced persistent, the most advanced stuff. But today we're going to talk about something else. And before that, I would like to ask you. So it's been almost exactly 30 years. Anybody knows what's the name, what malware was nicknamed the Great Worm? So you said first, Morris Worm. Perfect. There's a token of appreciation for you, so there you go. Thank you. So indeed, Morris Worm, 30 years ago, on the 4th or 5th of November, it was launched, 1987. It was devastating. There were no antiviruses back then. There were no real firewalls. I don't know exactly if there was IP tables back then. And it was devastating. It affected 10,000 computers. It's not much, but at that time, at that period, it's a lot. So how did they disinfect? They had to reboot all the computers in clusters. They had to take some computers, reboot them all at once, and then hope that an infected computer is not connected to that cluster. The estimated cost of damages done by the Morris Worm were, some people say that were $100,000 up to $1 million. in our money now. But actually we don't know, because we don't know exactly how much man-hours were spent cleaning this infection. And then the question remains, is nowadays different? Did we stop seeing infections? We have modern operating systems, we have modern antiviruses, this so-called next-gen antiviruses. We have modern firewalls, we have policies from policies, and we have good research. And then we still see this kind of bullshit. Of course, not cars yet, but we still see it. WannaCry, not Pentium, Bad Rabbit, last month. People and computers are still getting caught off guard, but people mostly, by viruses that are exploiting vulnerabilities that are already patched. WannaCry was patched. The Eternal Blue vulnerability, which was discussed in depth yesterday, it was already patched, and still computers got infected. So I would say it's a trend, and then this trend won't go away. Furthermore, there's also the issue of how many devices do we connect to the internet? How many devices are going to be connected to the internet? So business intelligence suggests, or they estimate, that by 2020 there are going to be like 30 billion devices. I think the reasoning is pretty sound, but then we have to take into consideration, or to see the bigger picture. What were the last major DDoS attacks? And we can see, there were mostly in the past 2 years, there were a lot of attacks. And the interesting was the attack against Krebs. This guy, he revealed the identity of a guy that was running a DDoS botnet that was doing DDoS attacks. And then he revealed the identity, it was all on his blog post. What did the bad guy do? He started attacking him full power. And he took his website down. And then Akamai said, guys, I'm sorry, Mr. Krebs, I'm sorry, we can't host you anymore. They're taking down our network. And then he went to Cloudflare. And then Cloudflare said, I'm sorry, it's too big of a difference. And then finally Google, with their cloud compute, and they have this Google Shield, they actually saved him because they were hosting him, and Google has had a better capacity than the DDoS operator. But it's still going on. DNS attack. You are all affected. I'm pretty sure about this. Either when you are using GitHub, and a lot of people are using GitHub for their daily jobs, either when you're using Skype, Skype was also affected, a lot of Microsoft services were affected. So these attacks that were targeting specific institutions like banks, governments, etc., now are actually attacking your life. They are influencing your day-to-day life. So some people might say, okay, there's no problem here, we carry on. But I think it's a recurring problem. I think this needs to be tackled in a different way. But we're not going to talk about what we do here. We're going to talk about my research of how do we identify these attacks. But in order to identify an attack, you have to know what what the bad guys are looking for. So meet this guy. This guy is called Dahui. It's an IP camera. It's developed by a Chinese company, and it has a special feature. It has a hard-coded username and password in the firmware. So no matter what you want, no matter what administrator password you're setting, you can set the strongest password ever, it will still have the extra administrator password. Can anyone guess what's that? Admin? Yeah? No, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Close. So, guys, close this one. Actually, it's this one. So, I think it's a little bit of evil in this one, but it's real. You can look it up. So, I should throw away some of those, there's one for you as well. Furthermore, people are actually, they don't care. They go and they try to buy the cheapest product. And then it's an ongoing problem because people buy insecure products, they put them on the internet, and vendors, seeing that they actually have sales, they produce more insecure devices. And you can't solve this problem unless you force the vendors. You tell them like you're banned for selling insecure devices, or either users stop using these insecure devices. They kind of like get informed, miraculously getting informed. But that's not gonna happen. Sorry. So the bad guys, they like to use this approach. They're not gonna go for like big fish. They're not gonna go like buy zero-day exploit, try to break into the Windows, the most up-to-date Windows with the latest patches. No, they're gonna go for the easiest, for the easy wins. If there's a vulnerability reported on the internet and that is publicly available, for sure there are gonna be like 10,000, 100,000, 1 million routers that are being exploited, and then they go for that. If the success rate is 0.1%, they still can gain some winnings from this one. So let's see what are they actually gaining. And then there's this study that some researchers went and said that in major US cities, there are like 170 million devices that are potentially infected, can be potentially turned into like doing bad things. So they're not infected right now, but they can be turned into to do this. And researchers have been reporting this stuff for a long time. Since like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. These guys from SANS, they reported a problem where you could like just fetch the configuration file without authentication. My colleague Fabio in 2014, I'm sorry for the small text. Basically, he said there was a vulnerability that was affecting 4.5 million DSL routers in Brazil. And then basically this large ISP just handed out these DSL routers, and then the bad guys found a way to change their DNS settings. And then basically 4.5 million people could have been affected. And then of course they were like trying to do bad things. We will talk about that later. So we said, okay, bad guys are always going for the easy win. So what can we do? We can set up honeypots. But you're saying that, like everybody sets up honeypots right now. Our idea was, and what we noticed, is that the bad guys are actually smart. So they're smart enough not to go for all IP ranges. It's useless to scan for infected devices on Amazon network or on DigitalOcean, or scanning on a Google Cloud computer. No, instead, you want to actually scan for residential networks. Those are public, so basically you can go there and then you can search for those networks. So this is what we did. These are the largest residential networks we deployed honeypots in. So it was kind of like, hey, my friend, can you set up this device in your network? Okay, sure. Can you set up this honeypot? Sure. And then they agreed to. So we had FDS, we had telecom, we had UPC. Those are the greatest ones. We also had like some networks outside. And we set up these kind of devices. You might recognize it. It's a Raspberry Pi. And this device, you just hook it up on your router, you do port forwarding, and that's it. It can collect all requests. Of course, given that your ISP is not blocking requests, which those guys are not doing it, thank God. So we set up devices. And then in the past 2 years, or 3 actually, we cycled around 300 IP addresses because residential network IP addresses are dynamic, so they change from time to time. And we got like a lot of requests. Of course, some of them were not interesting. But what we noticed, and what a clever gentleman said yesterday, there are common issues that are not because of the user. Those common issues are actually made by the vendor. So we noticed these common issues as well, but we also, the most prominent problems were brute force attacks, which is like so 2010 or something, but they're still going on. We noticed the Zyxel vulnerability, which is non-zero vulnerability. We're going to talk about this. The shell shock, And the two latest, I'm going to talk about the latest two vulnerabilities, the one from March and the one from September. So, what were they trying to do? Take control over your device in various ways. If your device is not smart enough to run Linux or to run like full-grown commands like dget or bash, they can change your DNS settings. So this is what they did. Basically, the ROM pager, which is a Zyxel firmware, has the administrative interface exposed to the internet. Why do they do that? I don't know. But furthermore, it is password protected. You can set up your most secure password there. What is not protected and is publicly accessible is the option to download the configuration of the settings. You can just go there and you can just download, fetch them without any password. Furthermore, you can fetch the configuration file, parse it, and then find the password. So then tomorrow, the user will change the password, saying that, oh, my router was infected, I changed the password, everything is fine. No, tomorrow, I fetch the new settings, I decode them, and I point your router. So what did they do? They changed the name servers, and they're showing their own ads. So instead of seeing Google ads, whenever a user would go on a web page and then that web page would have ads, the user would be displayed the attacker generated ads. So they want to get rid of it. Sometimes they would try to ask you to install Netflix. Why? I don't know, because those buttons didn't work. So I tried to click yeah, but it didn't work. Also, the ads were displayed in a different language, which was like also based on different than where my IP was based. So that's also something different. In another case, they were trying to ask people to invest in their own cryptocurrency. Why would you make your own cryptocurrency? I don't know. If people invested, I also don't know. So this website also died. Most of the times they were trying to ask you to install browser extension. So this was one try, another try, and third with luck. So basically they were trying to ask you to install a browser extension, which would then read and change all your data on the websites that you're visiting. Basically, credential harvesting, behavior, like which websites you visit, what do you do on those websites. This add-on was collecting and then sending them to their SQL server. Of course, I imported this one and it's taken down, but they can just build new ads. If the user is not instructed enough to click cancel, then it's game over. Then, of course, it's the old Flash update, obviously. So this one didn't work. This one worked. You had to have like a specific Internet Explorer, and then you would download this one. Of course, it's a Trojanized Adobe Flash update. Once you download, they will take over of your computer, and then it's game over from that point. So people still fall for this one. Basically, this is only from the DNS chain. So the Apache Struts is really interesting. It was reported in March by Cisco. It's a vulnerability in the web server, the Struts web server. Guess what? We've seen hits 1 day later. So it's not only we've seen hits, we've seen like a lot in March. So 10,000. So how did it look like? I hope you can see it. Like it's a little bit, the screen is a little bit bright. Basically, it was a vulnerability, kind of like shell shock, where you could run in the content type header, you could run commands. So this is kind of like, sorry, this is a bit entangled, but let's make it like prettier. So you can see that they're trying to stop the firewall, fetch an executable, and then run it. So I said, okay, let's see what they have there. So if you go on that IP address, which is now it went away, it's an IP address in China. They have like a custom web server, and then they have like this really interesting PHP info kind of page, similar PHP info page, and they had like this specific payloads. I'm sorry you can't see, like the screen is like this one. They had specific payloads for specific campaigns, and you can see like there were like 200 devices that were like fetching this stuff. Okay, after a little bit of poking, I found a new server they deployed. It was the uptime 15 hours. And in 15 hours, they already infected almost 1,000 devices, which fetched this sample. Of course, this sample was new, we didn't detect it, I sent it to a new virus, so it's not detected. But still, in 15 hours to get like 1,000 devices, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good catch. And then, like some days later, they added like more samples. They also added some for other architectures, and they had like a list of targets. So basically, why were they having this stuff? Because once a router was infected, they didn't want to just have it sitting idle in their botnet. They wanted for that router to start scanning other devices, and the list of targets it was given in this archives in order to detect more networks. So basically, it's like an automatically growing botnet. Your infected devices are scanning for other infected devices and infecting them. So one day I was like sitting at my desk, checking logs, and then I noticed that there were like some 3 days where no samples have been downloaded. And then it's like crazy. I was like, whoa, why is this happening? And then I was looking at the logs, I was getting hits, and then I noticed this one. These comments were like echoing FTP comments into a file, and then they were like running the file, the bat file. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. So my honeypot knew how to automatically extract files. Whenever it was saying like vget or fetch or curl, it would automatically download the samples that were like sent by the attackers. But then I never expected to receive FTP comments. So this was a clever idea used by the attackers when they were like trying to avoid, because they noticed they noticed researchers are deploying honeypots, automated honeypots, and this is the way of messing with the honeypots. So they were, as I said, they had a list of IP addresses. The scans were from Southeast China, Southeast Asia, and then they were attacking mostly Korean and Chinese networks. This is like they were trying to attack like 2 million IP addresses in China, 1 million in Korea. So I think they had like a specific infected devices there. So they were like aiming for that stuff. But they don't care where they have their infected devices, because they were like also hitting Japan, US, and etc. So now things didn't change that much. Remember I told you 10 years ago it was reported a case where you could fetch the configuration file from a device. Well, guess what? Embedded, on the 12th of September, Embedded released a blog post saying that various high-end TP-D-Link routers are vulnerable to an attack where you can fetch the configuration file without being authenticated. So basically, unauthenticated retrieval of config files. And then it's game over. You fetch the config file, you parse it, and then you gain control over the router. This router is running Linux. So they can not only change the DNS settings, but they can also run commands and infect it. And guess what? 1 week later, we started seeing hits in our honeypots as well, trying to exploit this vulnerability. What is interesting is that I've only seen requests that are fetching the configuration file. I've never seen them actually using the config, the supplied username and password, in actually trying to change my settings. So what I'm thinking they're actually doing reconnaissance right now. They're like scanning all the routers to see like, is this model we're looking for? Is this vulnerable? Yes. Then we add it to our list, and then later they might launch an attack. Maybe to not raise suspicion, because if you fetch the config file, okay, that's not like easily visible unless you have like a monitoring device in front of the router. But if you log in from an external IP address, then that actually gets logged. So they're just doing reconnaissance right now. And then what did D-Link do? They were like, oh, okay, D-Link closed one of the vulnerabilities, 2 other vulnerabilities were still ignored. And then so from out of 3 of them, there was an attempt, I guess, to fix 1. So currently, there are vulnerable D-Link routers with only 1 vulnerability patch, and the other 2 vulnerabilities are still exploitable. So the problem is like, it's a never-ending problem. My last case I would like to show you to you is a situation where people are trying to scan infected devices and infecting them with an REC botnet. So that's pretty simple, you know. You try to see if you can infect it with shell shock or with like vulnerabilities I showed you before, and then you infect it. What's interesting is that I was kind of hinting, and I'd like to tell you that now it's TLP red, so please don't take any pictures of this one yet, because it's an ongoing investigation. I was kind of hinting that they are on me. And the reason I saw that is because they were like targeting specifically LDS networks, stopping like in specific blocks of cities, you know, because on LDS you can actually see which IP addresses are on each city. So they were like kind of stopping, and they knew where to stop. And I was like, okay, fine. Let's connect and see that they had like 150 infected routers. Then later they had like 100, because if people restart the router, they don't get persistence. They have to reinfect it again. And then this happens. And then this happens. And I was like, Mr. Albert and Mr. Catalin. Okay. Nice. So we are actually gonna we have some of the details. We still want to see if they start the DDoS attack, because currently they just keep those networks, like those infected devices, they just keep them idle, they don't do anything. Of course, the server is a little bit better configured, but there's still the obstacles I kind of lay, you know, so we'll see what's happening. Now, how do we hunt for hunters? The idea of the honeypot is simple. We have a Docker container, and the code is on GitHub. And then the Docker container, why did we choose Docker? Is because we can actually run anything on it, and it can run on any platform. You have like a Raspberry Pi, you have a Commodore 64, you have like, I'm joking about Commodore, but I don't know. You have like a phone or a router, maybe. You can virtualize, if it runs Docker, you can run this honeypot project. And also, all the logs are centralized together using Kibana and Logstash, which is pretty standard practice. And then basically we can see like all the attacks, and then we can centralize all the logs and see like the areas of attack and patterns. So this is not new. This is not something new we're doing. But what is interesting, and what I would like to tell you to share from our experience, and some of you might actually know, is that it's not enough to have simple dumb honeypots. It's not enough anymore. Attackers are actually smarter than that. So instead of actually sending with a full payload using shell shock, for example, they will try to see if your device is capable of running commands. So they will send the request with an echo command. Echo struts 214. And then if your device replies with that one, they will send a second stage exploit, and then they will actually hit your device. Which, this is interesting, this means that you need to have interactive honeypots, you have to have tailored responses. So the interactivity, I chose to use Python for interactivity because I can leverage the idea that on the web honeypot, the client, in the specification, the client needs to send the request before the server responds. So I can see the request, I can map it to a specific vendor. I can say, is this a request for ROM0 attack? Yes, I return the ROM0 page. Is this like a struts attack using the content header? Yes, I return the struts web page. Is this like shell shock for an unknown vendor? Yes, okay, I return the default page with try to execute the command. So you need to do like a little bit of work. Your honeypot needs to be a little bit smarter. Currently, pattern matching might work, but I don't know what might work in the future. So there's one big cloud service that has almost all the passwords in the world. Can anybody guess which one is it? LastPass? No. So no, leaked passwords. Pastebin. Who said Pastebin? Okay, I'll try to throw upon the other. Let's see. Oh, yes, perfect. And one for you as well. So, Pastebin, yes, thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much. So, our idea was that, okay, we want to see combinations of new passwords that are being used by attackers. So there are lists of leaked passwords, but we want to see new combinations. If we notice a new combination, then it might mean that somebody found a vulnerability in a new device, and then they're exploiting that one. So the idea is, how do we scan payslip? So we can leverage the idea of Yara rules to scan entire content of payslip. By using our internal project, which is called Clara, we can have Yara rules that are scanning for payslip content. So this is a screenshot of Clara, and basically you can use a Yara rule to scan multiple repositories. We have like multiple virus repositories, and one repository is the Yara, the payslip repository. So basically, we are scanning for new passwords to see if we can find new infected devices. So with this being said, I would like to say that with IPv6 protocol is going to be a hell of a mess, because all devices will have public IP addresses, and then they will actually get more. The attack range is going to be even greater, and if you add new exploits in the wild, it's going to be even crazier, because unsecure devices will still be developed by vendors. We can't stop that. I would like to, but we can't. So unsecure devices are still going to be there. There are going to be more and more connected computers. So if you thought that this is interesting, if you'd like to actually share the code for our honeypots with you, it's going to be released as an open source project. It's not yet ready to be open source. But if you want to play with the honeypot, please get in touch. I'm going to be there for the entire day. You know where to find me. Like, I'm happy to discuss with you, like later for some beers. So let's get in touch. And with this being said, thank you very much for listening.